Tonight, being gay and Mormon.
I'm angry that kids are killing themselves.
The tiebreaker in Virginia. And the weatherman who won't talk about climate.
If you want to know about climate, go talk to a climatologist. I do weather.
The Trump administration announced a proposal today to allow offshore oil and gas drilling in almost all U.S. waters, a reversal of vast protections that President Obama put into effect. The proposed regulation would give the energy industry access to some areas that have been protected for decades, and the Department of the Interior would be allowed to lease federal waters in the Arctic, as well as the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and the eastern Gulf of Mexico. The proposal now has to go through a public comment period. The Justice Department is doing away with policies that have given states leeway to make pot legal. The Obama-era guidance to prosecutors deprioritized federal enforcement of drug laws in states that legalize marijuana, except in certain cases like preventing distribution to minors and keeping drug money from going to gangs and cartels. But today, Attorney General Jeff Sessions said that guidance undermines the rule of law, and he told U.S. attorneys they should go back to principles established in the 1980s. 8 states and the District of Columbia have legalized recreational marijuana. The Indian government says that personal data it's collected from millions of citizens is, quote, safe and secure, after a national newspaper reported it was able to buy login credentials for a government database. The login cost just $8. It enabled a reporter to instantly get data, including names, telephone numbers, and home addresses. India's Unique Identification Authority said it has investigated the claim, and that there was no breach of personal biometric data. The system, called Aadhaar, has been under intense scrutiny over privacy concerns. Prime Minister Narendra Modi made enrollment mandatory for basic financial transactions, including filing taxes, signing up for government benefits, and opening bank accounts. A Zimbabwean court today dropped charges against an American journalist accused of subversion and insulting former President Robert Mugabe. Martha O'Donovan, who writes for a political satire channel, faced up to 20 years in prison. She denied all charges. O'Donovan can now get her passport back, but her lawyer told reporters that she could still be summoned to return to court if prosecutors believe they have evidence against her. Today, Indonesian officials shrank the exclusion zone around Bali's erupting Mount Agung, allowing thousands of people, including many farmers, to return to their homes near the volcano. Around 70,000 people had evacuated the area and gone to stay in shelters. Mount Agung is still spewing lava and ash, but now the danger zone around the crater has been reduced from 6 miles to 4.
I will strive to the utmost of my ability to be what you would want me to be.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is in mourning this week after the death of its president and prophet, Thomas Monson. He was 90 years old. Monson oversaw the church during a decade of major change. He lowered the minimum age of female missionaries, contributing to a dramatic rise in the number of Mormon missionaries worldwide, and threw open the church's long secretive archives to scholars. But Monson was also a traditionalist. He refused to let women become priests, and excluded LGBT families to the point where many began seeking a community of their own.
I found this recently at a flea market. If I show it to any other Mormon moms, they'll get it. It's this idea that motherhood, you're like pedestalized as a woman in the church in your role as a wife and mother. And your job is to get these little cherubic children back to heaven to live with God again as a complete intact family.
As a wife, mother, and lifelong Mormon, Diane Oviatt knows about life on a pedestal. Today, she feels abandoned by the church, even though she was the one to leave it last year.
My Mormonism is a little bit complicated, but I would probably mostly describe myself as a refugee from Mormonism. To some people, I say I'm on sabbatical. It's kind of up in the air. You don't leave Mormonism easily. And when you have Orthodox family members, there is shunning that happens.
Turning away from the Mormon church isn't just leaving a religion, it's leaving a way of life. Her 3 children are now grown, but Diane says that for years, she questioned aspects of her faith.
The saying goes, you keep putting things on the shelf, and then for those of us who've transitioned out, it's because our shelf broke.
And that's, for you, this shelf got heavier and heavier and then split.
What really crashed my shelf was my son coming out as gay in 2007. You want it on ice or just in a can?
Ross Oviatt came out to his mother in his family's kitchen one night after his senior year in high school. He left the church a year later.
Harboring a secret like that is just so toxic, and it just eats away at your soul. It's not an experience I would never, want to repeat.
I'll never forget what you said to me at the table that night. Like, he just looked at me and he said, I want to go on a mission and I want to get married in the temple. And he just saw this huge roadblock when he came out. Like, now what do I do?
What Diane did was become an activist, co-founding a support group for mothers of LGBT Mormon youth called Mama Dragons. But she struggled with the Mormon Church's views on homosexuality. The church doesn't condemn same-sex attraction, but requires celibacy from its LGBT members. Then, just over 2 years ago, church leadership introduced a new policy that expelled same-sex couples and prevented their children from engaging in church activities. For Diane, it was the last straw.
I kind of had this stubborn moment where I'm like, damn it, this is my church too, and you're not pushing me out with this bigoted bullshit. I just felt like I'm going to stay and I'm going to fight. And then exactly a year later, November of 2016, I almost had this personal revelation where it was like, this isn't changing. This thing didn't go away. And I just thought, this is here to stay. This is my church.
Thank you so much for being here, everybody. I want to give just all of you applause just for being here.
In a small church in Northern California, Diane and her husband Tom are confronting their crisis of faith. But they didn't come here to worship. They're attending a workshop for Mormons looking for a new tribe.
And I'm lost in many ways. That's why I'm here.
I'm here just to feel your vibe. I'm here just to feel the non-judgmentalness of y'all and to find my people.
They came here because doubt has affected their relationships, because of the string of funerals for gay children in their Mormon communities.
The mamas in Utah go to funerals, and it's devastating. And we've worked so hard to get people in Salt Lake to listen, and they won't.
Church leaders say they sympathize with families who have lost loved ones to suicide, but the Mormon Church doesn't publish numbers on how many people leave the faith, nor how many of its young people have killed themselves. The anecdotes come from people like Diane, who say the church is ignoring a crisis among its youth. Guiding the group is John DeLynn. He's a 6th-generation Mormon who was excommunicated more than 2 years ago. DeLynn has a doctorate in psychology and helps others who are considering leaving the faith.
Our job is to help you look within, not what you've been conditioned to think, but what inside of you feels and seems true. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It's November 16th, 2017.
John DeLynn's journey out of the church began over a decade ago when he started asking questions about Mormonism on his podcast, Mormon Stories. He interviews Mormons grappling with their faith. In February of 2015, the church excommunicated DeLynn, accusing him of using his platform to renounce Mormon theology and lead others away from the church. DeLynn says he was targeted because of his public advocacy on behalf of LGBT Mormons. 8 months later, he leaked the church's policy on same-sex couples. Today, DeLynn says the podcast has more than 60,000 weekly downloads. Despite his public platform, DeLynn is protective of his family's privacy. He declined to be interviewed at his own home.
Hey, sweet mom, I love you.
How are you?
He agreed to meet at his mother's retirement complex.
What was the excommunication like on you? What was it like on your family?
It was a nightmare. Think about Mormonism as like a tribe. The elders in the community, your family, your friends, your neighbors, it's just all like one huge family. And it's like being cut off from the people you love most.
The Mormon Church declined multiple requests for interviews. They also declined to respond to a list of questions sent to them about teen suicides among LGBT Mormons or the excommunication of John DeLynn.
We've got a long way to go. But, it's not as bad as it was 20 years ago.
And like you said, wait 20 more years.
20 more years, and you can guarantee that we'll have, gay and lesbian Mormons singing in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Well, let me say that there already are gay and lesbian Mormons singing in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, but they'll be out and married and happy singing in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. It'll come. You just have to wait about 20 to 30 years.
Virginia held its statewide elections in November, and Democrats up and down the ballot did a lot better than they thought they would, winning the governor's race and leaving Republicans' majority in the House of Delegates hanging by a thread. That thread was House District 94, where Republican David Yancey appeared to win by 10 votes. After a recount, Democrat Shelley Simons won by 1 vote. And then, after a court challenge, the two ended up dead even. Vice News was with Simons this morning as she prepared to have her fate determined by random drawing.
We had a great campaign. We had all the right messages, and we worked really hard, and we knocked on all the doors, and people came out and voted. And it was a great democratic process, and now we're going to end on a game of chance.
Shelley Simons is already a politician. She sits on the Norfolk School Board. She's also run for the House of Delegates seat in Virginia's 94th District before. In 2015, she lost by a little bit. This time, it was a tie. Today, that tie was broken by the Virginia Board of Elections in a room near the state capitol building in Richmond.
We had been using a glass bowl for many years, and most recently a cardboard box. I wanted something that was a little bit more appropriate for the importance of today's drawing. So I did ask the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts to find us a bowl that was made by a Virginia artist.
It was a weird day for all involved.
You didn't have to be here today, so why did you choose to come to watch this happen in person?
Because I care about the election. I'm a rule follower. They said there was a drawing. I initially thought that I needed to participate somehow. I was imagining like drawing straws or I'm just being honest.
I mean, it makes sense to me. This is nothing. This doesn't happen very often.
I know.
So you don't know how. I mean, it's fine. People don't know.
It's all new territory.
This is a very different kind of election day. It's hard for political types to figure out how to act. Simons was still campaigning.
Really appreciate it. So if people elect me, I'm going to vote 100% with the environment every time.
If the bowl elects you.
Yeah.
This is what we're talking about, right? We're talking about the idea, right? Extreme difference in policies that can happen because of what happens when somebody puts their hand in a bowl.
Right. So if fate elects me today, I will vote very differently on Medicaid expansion, on the environment, on women's access to women's health and Planned Parenthood. He's going to vote the opposite way.
Before Simons could find out if she won, everyone had to learn something about the bowl.
The bowl is by Stephen Glass, who is a Virginia artist. The exterior of the glass, we have a wax resist process. The interior is a red oxide. Mr. Glass says that this represents the sky on the outside and the earth on the inside.
Finally, the drawing.
The winner of House District 94 is David Yancey.
And I don't even want to start about how do you recount a split precinct.
I mean, you seem a little ticked off to me. What was it actually like to watch that happen?
I mean, I would have been much more at peace with ending this on a game of chance if I hadn't won the recount. What does this mean for democracy moving forward?
Barely a week into the new year, another massive security vulnerability has been revealed. But this time, it's your hardware that's in danger. 2 vulnerabilities were discovered by researchers at 4 universities in collaboration with Google's Project Zero. Unlike most security issues, which are flaws in software, These owe their existence to the physical design of computer chips. The bugs' nicknames: Meltdown and Specter.
If you think about maybe apps on your phone, all those apps are running in their own little sandboxes. One app cannot interfere with the operation of another app, or one app cannot spy on the operation of another app. So you wouldn't want, for instance, your email client on your phone should not be able to look into your own photos without your permission. Meltdown specifically is a flaw that, through some very clever hardware trickery, allows that isolation to be broken by being able to spy on memory in all of the system.
Meltdown allows hackers access to everything currently being stored in your computer's memory. That can mean all of the passwords saved by your browser are vulnerable. Microsoft and Apple have issued patches for Meltdown, which affects the hundreds of millions of almost every Intel processor sold since 1995, so hackers won't be able to exploit those devices. But the jury is still out on the potential impact of Specter. Specter works by targeting individual applications. That means that fixing it could require the creator of every app on your phone to provide a security patch.
Specter does exist in all of these CPUs, including mobile CPUs, but is almost impossible to fix in software. We do expect Specter to linger for a much longer time and slowly increase in potency as the possibilities of this leak become better understood by the open research community, but also the malicious research community.
Meltdown and Specter both have a silver lining and a really dark cloud attached to them. The good news is that security researchers working in the public interest found them first and warned major technology companies before nearly every device on Earth was impacted. The bad news is that the scale of the damage avoided is greater than almost any previously known hack. And it's just a matter of time before the bad guys use this roadmap to find more potentially devastating hardware exploits.
Spotify, the world's largest music streaming service, is planning on going public this year. But a lawsuit filed in December by a music publishing company called Wixen, which represents the music of thousands of artists, including big names like Tom Petty and Neil Young, could complicate the company's plans. Wixen is accusing Spotify of building a multi-billion-dollar business by streaming music it doesn't have the rights to. Every song recorded in the United States has 2 copyrights attached to it. One is for musical composition, which generally goes to the songwriter. The other is for the actual sound recording of the song, which is generally owned by a music label. Spotify has cut big royalty deals with record companies. But Wixen, which represents songwriters, says Spotify never licensed or paid for more than 10,000 songs that it continues to stream today. Its approach to copyright has been sort of like Uber's regulatory battles with cities and states. Just start up and hope the legal red tape goes away. As a result, Spotify has already faced other lawsuits like Wixen's. And last spring, it settled a class action royalties case filed by singer-songwriter David Lowery.
Think about songwriters, they're in the studio and somebody's smoking a joint, somebody's writing some words. This doesn't lend itself to immediate registration of music into databases. That's when licensing gets difficult, when you sort of have to go through them one by one. The problem is that in this case, it looks like they hadn't got all the way there yet, because if Wixen's songs are unlicensed, that's a significant amount of songs. And in my case, my songs were in the copyright registry database. So apparently nobody looked.
Spotify hoped that settlement would make its copyright problems vanish. But Wixen is seeking $1.6 billion. Or about half of Spotify's annual revenue. Spotify is yet to respond. But now that billions are on the line, the real question is how much of that money belongs to artists, and how much Spotify gets to keep.
James Spann has one of the most recognizable faces in Alabama.
These are my future students right here.
I've been watching you since I was like a little kid.
Have a good day now. Okay.
What about the weather for the weekend ahead? That forecast and much more coming up in just a bit, so stay with us.
That's because he's the weatherman for ABC 3340 in Birmingham. And he's made it his mission to teach people about the weather and warn them about potential hazards. With 39 years of broadcast experience, he's become really good at it.
One thing we've learned that people really don't like, they don't like it when you stand in front of their town. Now,
Oh, I see. So you need to make sure that whenever you're talking about it, you move.
you come over here if you want to and work this monitor. Now, you made the wrong turn.
Oh, I see.
You never want to turn your back to the camera.
Oh, okay. Wait. Let me do this again. So you would move over this way.
Yes.
I
See how easy this is.
See?
I am paid money to stand here in front of a green wall when the weather is life-threatening. That's my core job. The main threat back in Mississippi, and it's
But despite his love for educating viewers about science, James draws the line at climate change. He won't talk about it on the air. When your audience maybe tweets at you or asks you, is this climate change? What is your reaction to that?
I say it's weather. And if you want to know about climate, go talk to a climatologist. I do weather. I don't do climate.
What exactly is your position on climate change?
My position is this. The climate is changing. The climate has always changed. The climate always will change. The question is, what is man's role?
So you think humans are causing climate change?
There has to be some anthropogenic element to it. The question is how much.
And for you, it's not necessarily the majority?
No, natural variability, in my opinion, is still the primary driver. And all of a sudden you become a sinner.
It's the unambiguous position of the American Meteorological Society that climate change is real and humans are responsible. But TV forecasters don't always agree.
There's no linkage to CO2 and temperature, unless, of course, it's one of these books, these 3D books you got to stand there on your head and cross your eyes to look at.
Solar cycles have a lot more to do with climate change on this planet than do CO2 emission and global warming.
The national media reported on this new study from the sky is falling or a doomsday point of view.
Remember, these are scientists. And for most viewers, the weather person is the only scientist they interact with on a regular basis. A survey of around 2,000 American Meteorological Society members released last year revealed that 38% of meteorologists aren't convinced that humans are the main cause of climate change. But that fact still doesn't get at the larger issue, namely whether it's a TV forecaster's job to talk about climate change at all. Why do you not feel a responsibility to talk about climate change?
So if you're in my position, you're on the wall over here.
Yeah.
And we've got a tornado that's down in Greensboro, Alabama, moving toward Brent, moving at 45 miles an hour. You're supposed to stop and say, wait a minute, this is caused by man-made climate change. Climate attribution studies take years. My role is to mitigate the loss of human life. Somebody else's role is to fight that battle.
You have a platform. You're a scientist with a platform, which a lot of other scientists don't necessarily have or are very bad at. You're good at it. When does it become the responsibility of a meteorologist to talk about this issue that will affect millions of lives?
That's a fair question. And my position is they hire me here to forecast the weather. They didn't hire me as a climatologist to discuss these things. You see, that this has developed tension here. We started talking about climate, and all of a sudden now it's, everybody's tense.
There are broadcast meteorologists who don't get uncomfortable talking about climate. Paul Gross is one of them.
Hey, Brandon.
Wrapped around twice.
In my show, I am going to be doing a little climate change thing, just so you know. It'd be like in the middle, after the rainfall graphic.
Paul Gross is one of the meteorologists for NBC's News 4 in Detroit. He says he's been talking about climate change on the air since the 90s.
And yeah, another heavy rain event. If you're noticing an increase in these, the science actually supports you. Let me show you what's happening due to the warming climate.
Paul is very active in the meteorological community. He's previously served as the chairman of the AMS's Committee on the Station Scientist, which aims to give on-air meteorologists the tools they need to talk about other scientific fields, like climate.
Well, there's an old saying that climate is what you expect, weather is what you get. By understanding what's happening with our climate, we can cross the line, if you will, and tell people in terms of trends if we're looking at more or less of a certain kind of day-to-day type of weather or weather extreme. And that's why I find it particularly important to talk about climate science.
Paul says he rarely gets pushback from his viewers, but advocacy groups have tried to influence his coverage.
I just throw that stuff in the trash, and believe me, I get plenty of it.
So you get mail
I do
about
get mail.
climate change.
Generally, it's only on one side of the aisle, if you will, and it's from groups that are opposed to the human element involving climate change. And there are some very well-funded groups that send a lot of misinformation.
Do you want to tell me who those groups are?
Well, I'll just mention one. It's called the Heartland Institute. I believe they're based out of Chicago. I get glossy mailings from them. I get emails all the time from them, and all that stuff goes in the trash.
A Heartland Institute spokesperson told us that they send these materials to TV meteorologists all across the country. He also said that Paul's claim that they spread misinformation is the kind of scare tactics that many TV meteorologists engage in, such as linking every severe weather event to man-caused global warming. Does it surprise you at all to know that there are meteorologists out there still on the air who don't think that humans are causing climate change?
There's just an overwhelming balance of science that shows that we're warming at an unnatural rate and that the proximate cause is human activity. I don't know how you can ignore that science, that's all. I'm not going to directly criticize a colleague because they might have their own reasons, but I would only say that I follow the science, and the science has pointed me in a direction.
James and Paul actually have a lot in common. They refuse to have their stance on climate change influenced by outside forces, and they both agree on the basic function of their job: to educate people about the weather and keep them safe. That hasn't changed, but scientific understanding on global warming has, and not everyone's willing to change along with it.
That's Vice News Tonight for Thursday, January 4th.